Hello and welcome back to Disneyland. We're in my toy box for Peter Pan's flight, and today we're going to start working on the logic for this toy box. It's pretty easy. I'll show you how to create Peter Pan's collection quest today, and then next time I'll show you how to implement the logic for the flying game. But before we do any of that, I forgot to set the toy box door properties back to the way I wanted at the end of the previous episode. So let's just take care of that. So this door should not go to the Haunted Mansion. We had to do that to bring the interior toys out. Where we really want that to go, we want to link it to an existing toy box. We want to go back to Fantasyland. And we want to set the door, the destination locator tag to 3. That's the locator that we placed outside of the doorway to Peter Pan's flight. So this will take us back there. Alright, so now that that's done, we can move on to today's episode. And I've already placed the creativity toys ahead of time. I'll review those in a moment. But first I want to let you know I have logic diagrams on my blog that might help you out with this. The link is in the video description, and you may want to reference those diagrams as we go. So the collection quest is a simple game. There's a lot of toys here, but don't panic. This is actually very easy. And it's a quest that I've implemented in a lot of other toy boxes, but I'm going to show you how to do that here again today. And a collection quest is a great way to encourage players to explore your toy box, especially if the collectibles are randomly placed. And we're going to do that, like I taught you in my Random Dungeons series. So for this quest, we're going to need some things. We have a locator, and I want you to notice the little blue dot on the tip there is facing in that direction, toward the Indian village. And the reason is because next time we're going to create the flying game. If you remember from the playthrough, we take them around the far side of the island, and they come back to this point. And so we want Pan facing the player when they land over here. So that's why that little blue dot is facing the direction that it is. And then we also need 2 dynamic triggers, a text displayer, a friendly wave generator, a radar marker, a randomizer, 5 replayers, a level starter, a collectible tracker, and a sound effect generator. And I forgot one thing. Let me pick up the friendly wave generator here. We also need the action enforcer. We'll drop that right over here next to the sound effect generator. Alright, and the collectible that we're going to use, let me pick that up. That is the red gem collectible. That's what I want to use for my quest. That stands out pretty well against the scenery here. If I tried to use blue or green, it could get lost in all of that blue and green. So red is a good color to use. Alright, to save a little bit of time, I already configured the wave on the friendly wave generator. And we're using the Peter Pan costume. He's going to be our mission giver. So again, you select Add New, find him in that long list. He's not too far down. And then put him in here. Okay, for the properties, we want to leave everything here the way it is, but we're going to take the generation delay to 0. And under the generated friend options, we are going to set this to stand still. Sorry for that little delay, I was looking that up. Okay. And then we're going to put Pan over at this locator. So we're going to do a new locator connection. Connect that to that locator. Okay. Now we have 2 dynamic triggers here. This one is going to be for the mission giver behavior. This one is going to be to take Peter Pan out of the toy box when the player wanders far enough away. If you notice my memory meter on the right, it's getting pretty full, so we can't leave townspeople lingering around in this toy box. We're going to have to take them out when we're done with them. So that's what this dynamic trigger is for. So let's start, first of all, with this dynamic trigger, the one that takes the townsperson out. We're going to do a new actor connection. We're going to connect that up to the friendly wave generator as our actor. On the properties for this, target needs to be the connected actor. And I'm going to set the trigger distance to 60. So the player will have to wander away a little ways before we take him out. So that way the player will probably not see us removing him. That's another reason why I've placed this here, is it's behind all of these trees. So kind of help hide the fact that we're going to take him out. Alright, so when the player first comes into the toy box, we want to put the townsperson in. So on our level starter, we're going to do a new logic connection on catalyze. Come over to the friendly wave generator and generate the wave. Alright. And we also do not want this dynamic trigger on by default. We want it off. So on the level starter, new logic connection on catalyze, we're going to turn off that dynamic trigger. Alright, now on the dynamic trigger, we'll do a new logic connection when the player exits that area. So when exited by player any, then we'll defeat the wave. And on the friendly wave generator, a new logic connection when that wave is defeated, we'll turn around and turn off the dynamic trigger. And that'll just save us a little bit of CPU power and help prevent any potential lag. Okay, now this dynamic trigger is for the mission giver. So once again, we're going to connect this up to that friendly wave generator as our actor. And on the dynamic trigger for this one, under properties, once again, the target is the connected actor. This one, the player is going to have to get closer to talk to Pan, so we're going to set this to 6. Alright, and let's go ahead and configure these other toys first. So the text displayer, properties, I'll set the duration to 4, text style to banner. On the radar marker, we're going to connect that up to our mission giver as an actor, so connect that to the friendly wave generator. And on the properties for the radar marker, beacon type will be a yellow exclamation point. Beacon location will be the connected actor, and we want this active when the player comes into the toy box. Alright, so on our dynamic trigger for the mission giver, we'll do a new logic connection when entered by player any. First thing we want to do is come over to our radar marker and turn that off. And on the radar marker, a new logic connection. When that's deactivated, we'll turn around and turn off this dynamic trigger because we only want to do the mission giver behavior one time. On our dynamic trigger for the mission giver, new logic connection when entered by player any. We're going to come over to our to our text displayer, and under the missions category, he's going to say, would you like to go on an adventure? And then the last thing we want to do on this dynamic trigger for the mission giver is a new logic connection when entered by player any. We'll turn on the other dynamic trigger so that when the player gets far enough away from Pan and they're off on their quest, we take out that mission giver. Alright, so there is all of the behavior for the mission giver. Oh, and one last thing on the dynamic trigger for the mission giver is a new logic connection when entered by player any. We want to come over to our randomizer and invoke that. And the randomizer is going to pick one of these 5 replayers. And we're going to use the replayers to put down our red gems. So they'll be in a different location every time we play this game. So on each of the replayers, you want to take the playback interval to 0. And that's pretty easy to do. Because you want that so that all of the gems will show up as quickly as possible and be on the radar. Okay. And I'm going to show you how to hook up or how to do one of these. You'll do the other 4 the same way. Okay? So first thing we're going to do is come over to our gem over here. I'm going to pick that up and put it down. That's going to get us back to that part of the editor. Okay? And then I'm going to come over here next to our first replayer and get out of the editor. Now to use the replayer, and you've seen this many times in my videos if you've watched them, we'll step on the replayer to get the little menu in the lower right. And on the Wii U, which is what I'm playing on, I press B to start recording. Only press that once and you'll notice the little icon below B turned from a circle to a square. That means it's now recording. Then we have to step off the replayer to get back into the editor. And now we want to place 10 of these gems around the toy box. And place them in different locations. I'd love to place some on the pirate ship, but unfortunately you'll see the bounding box for the pirate ship messes that up. But you can place one over off the end of the plank if we come out a little ways. So that's a possibility. For one of the other replayers, you could also put one up on top of the ship here somewhere, above the bounding box, and then have the player have to get up here by flying or something to get to it. But I've placed one so far. It's off the end of the plank. We'll put another one maybe over here inside of this foliage on the other side of the cove. Tuck it back here where it's kind of out of sight a little bit. And we can put one up here on the back side of the mountain. That's 3. Maybe put one in Mermaid Lagoon. Put one over here. Again, you've got all kinds of places around Mermaid Lagoon you can put one. Stick one down here inside Skull Rock, and unfortunately you can't place it inside the cave, which is a bummer, but we can tuck it over here. Kind of hide it in there out of the way. You could also put it up here. You could put it up on top of the island or on the back side. Lots of places you could hide it. Alright, so that's one at the pirate ship, one in the trees, one on the mountains. Number 4 was in Mermaid Lagoon. 5 was at Skull Rock. Again, I think 10 is sufficient, so you don't want to go too crazy with this, but we'll put one over here around Pan's hideout. This will be number 6. And you can place it inside this little room here, up around on these ledges. I'm going to put one inside Pan's little hideout here. Maybe we'll tuck it back over in this room. That's 6. For number 7, we'll put one at the Indian camp. Number 8, we'll put this one up on the mountain here somewhere. And You could place it inside this little hidden cave, or you could place it up on top of the mountain. You have to use the ship or a flying character to get up here to get to it. You could place it down here around the base of it, out in plain sight. Lots of different options, but that was number 8. Of course, you got all these little places around here. I'm going to place this one. Maybe tuck it back over here. That would be, what, 9? I've lost count. And number 10 we'll put over here on the rope bridge. And again, you've got brush over here, places where you can hide it. You've got places in that brush where you can hide it. You can put it up on top of these little mountains. But you only want about 10 or so. Got ledges over here and down in Crocodile Creek. All kinds of places where you could stash these things. Back in that little cubby, up around up here. Just be creative. Let's go ahead and exit out of the editor. Now that we have our gems, we'll step back on the replayer, and I press B again to stop recording, and A to clear. You can watch the little gem over there at the pirate ship. Again, only press A one time or you'll corrupt that replayer. So now do the same thing for each of these other replayers in turn. You'll step on that, you'll start recording, put 10 gems in different places around the island, and then come back, stop recording, and clear. Do the same thing for each of the other 4, for all 5 of those replayers, okay? Alright, and then on the randomizer, you're going to do a new logic connection on random trigger 1, do a playback on the first replayer. On the randomizer, new logic connection on random trigger 2, do a playback on the second one. On the randomizer, a new logic connection, random trigger 3, invoke the third one to do the playback. New logic connection, random trigger 4, do the fourth one. And on the randomizer, you guessed it, random trigger 5, do the fifth one. And so when the randomizer is invoked by this dynamic trigger at the start of the mission, the randomizer will randomly pick one of these 5 and do a playback on it. And that'll put the gems out at the location that you place them for that replayer. So you'll get some randomness to where the gems are, which is really good. Alright, the collectible tracker is going to keep track of the players picking up those collectibles. So on the collectible tracker, under the properties, we'll set the collectible type to be the red gem. So the red gem collectible, and we'll turn on the flag to show them on radar. And on the collectible tracker, we'll do a new logic connection. When the final collectible is collected, we'll come over to our action enforcer and have all of the players celebrate. And we also want to play a sound effect, and we want the player to be able to hear that no matter where they are. So on the properties for the sound effect generator, turn off 3D sound at speaker or locator. And on the collectible tracker, a new logic connection. When the final collectible is collected, come over to the sound effect generator, go to the musical category, and play fanfare. That'll let the player know they've got all the gems. And that's it for the collection quest. It's pretty straightforward. Now, since we have a little bit of time, let's add the townspeople that we're going to use around the toy box, because it'd be nice to have some characters actually in the toy box. And so what I'm going to do, once again, you'll notice the memory meter on the right is getting full. So we can't just place townspeople out of the townspeople drawer and leave them in the toy box, because that's going to take up a lot of memory and add a lot of lag potentially. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set up 4 zones in the toy box. For each zone, you'll need a friendly wave generator, a counter, and a dynamic trigger. The first zone is going to be here at Hook's ship, and I've placed 1 locator on the deck. This is where we're going to place Captain Hook. You can see where I've done that. The second zone is going to be at Mermaid Lagoon. For this zone, we need the same 3 Creativitoys. We need the dynamic trigger, friendly wave generator, and the counter. And notice where I've placed the locators. This one's here with the little blue dot facing the way it is up on top of that rock. There's another one over here on top of that rock. And another one right here on top of that rock up in the air a little bit. If I drop it down, it'll be underneath that rock. So we're going to place it up here. Zone number 3 is going to be Pan's hideout. Once again, the same 3 Creativitoys. Friendly wave generator, dynamic trigger, counter. And I placed the locators underneath inside the caves here. So I've got one here. I've got one over here. And I've got the other one over there. But you can place them anywhere you want down here. And zone number 4 is going to be the Indian camp. Again, same 3 controls. And I've got 3 locators here around the campfire. Notice which way the little blue dots are facing. I've got them facing the fire. Okay. Now I'll show you how to hook up one zone. You can do the other 3 yourself because they're all basically identical. The only difference is the number of locators and the characters that we're using. So in our first zone, if we look at the friendly wave generator, to save a little time, I've already set up the wave. We're using the Captain Hook costume. Okay, so scroll through the list and find him. For the properties on this, take the generation delay to 0. And for the generated friend options, I'm going to set his behavior to socialize. And we're going to connect up our friendly wave generator to the locator on the pirate ship. And for our dynamic trigger, we're going to connect that up to the same locator. The locator is going to be the center of our zone. Okay. And on the properties for the dynamic trigger, the target needs to be the locator. And the trigger distance, I'm going to set this to 70. And all of the other zones, but 1, are also set that same way. I'll show you which one's different after we're done here. On the counter, I'm going to leave all the properties the way they are, just set the visible display to off. Okay, so on the dynamic trigger, we'll do a new logic connection. When entered by player Annie, we're going to generate the wave. That'll put Captain Hook in there. So when we enter the radius around that locator, we want to add Captain Hook. And he doesn't need to be there if the player isn't anywhere near the pirate ship, and that's the idea. So we're going to use the counter to keep track of the players that are inside the radius around that locator. So on the dynamic trigger, we're going to do a new logic connection. When entered by player Annie, we'll come over to the counter and we're going to increment the count by 1. So every time a player enters the zone around that locator, we increment our counter. And also on the dynamic trigger, we want to know when the players leave the zone. So we're going to do a new logic connection on the dynamic trigger when exited by player any. We'll come over to the counter and we'll decrement the counter by 1. And then finally on the counter, we'll do a new logic connection when 0 is reached, which means that all the players have left this zone. Then we'll come over to the friendly wave generator and defeat the wave. That'll take Captain Hook out. Okay? So that's pretty straightforward. We've created a zone around that locator. When any player enters it, we put Captain Hook there. And when all the players leave that zone, we take Hook out. All of the other zones work the same way, so you'll hook them up the exact same way. The only difference is, at Mermaid Lagoon, you're going to connect this up to all 3 of those locators. So the friendly wave generator gets connected to all 3. The dynamic trigger gets connected to that one over there straight ahead. On the friendly wave generator, the wave is configured with 3 aerial costumes. Those are our mermaids. And on the properties for this, everything's the same except under the generated friend options, you're going to set the behavior to admire. And everything else stays the same. The properties on the dynamic trigger are, oops, that should have been. That should be locator. That should be 70. Okay. And on the counter, properties on that are the same. Just turn off visible display. For the zone at Pan's hideout, you'll connect up the friendly wave generator to all 3 of the locators down in the cave. You can see there's 3 lines going down there. The wave here is configured for Peter Pan, the Slightly costume, and the Tinkerbell costume. You're going to add all 3 of those to this one. One will show up at each locator. And under the properties, take the generation delay to 0 and set the behavior to none. Leave that default so they'll wander around down in there. On this one, the dynamic trigger, this is the one that's different. Target is locator, but you're going to set the trigger distance to 40. The radius around the locator down there doesn't have to be as big because it's a small cave and the player doesn't need to get very far. If you're going to get too far away from that, that means you're not down in those caves. And I connected the dynamic trigger up, I think, to this locator here. But it doesn't really matter. Any of those would work. And again, the counter is set up the same way. And then finally, on the zone over here for the Indian camp, connect that up, the friendly wave generator, to all 3 locators. Configure the wave with 3 Tonto costumes. Unfortunately, that's the only Indian we have, so that's what we have to use. And under the properties, take the generation delay to 0. Under the generated friend options, set behavior to jump up. So they're going to be jumping up and down at the fire and having a party. And again, the dynamic trigger, you can see which locator that's connected to. And for the properties, trigger distance is 70. And the counter is set the same as all the others. And there you go. When you come over to the Indian camp, you'll have Indians. When you go visit Pan's hideout, you'll have him and the Lost Boys. When you go to the Mermaid Lagoon, there'll be mermaids. And everything is really good. And now that we're done, we can take out our gem. We don't need to leave that there. And you can go ahead and save your game. If you want to test this without exiting out of the toy box and coming back in, you'll want to hook a button up to invoke your level starter, and then you can push the button, which will set the initial properties and generate pan, and then you can test this out. And when you're all done, move all of the Creativitoys down below the terrain. Okay? The only thing you're going to leave up here are the locators. Do that for the zones as well. And that's it. We have our zones for the different characters around the toy box. We have our collection quest with Pan. The only thing we have left is the logic for the flying game, and I'll show you how to hook that up next time, and then we'll be finished with this toy box. Thank you for watching my video today. Before you go, please hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel, all that good stuff. Also, don't forget that I have logic diagrams on my blog for today's episode. The link is in the video description. That's all for me today. Take care.